Hello, everybody. Welcome to another monthly audio drama office hour where I'm going to be answering your questions, both questions that have been submitted in advance as well as questions that you ask live if you're watching live, just talking about audio drama. If you found your way here and you don't know who I am, I'm also streaming on TikTok, so that's certainly possible. I am Lauren Shippen. I'm an audio drama creator, director, writer, producer, a million different things. I've been doing that for 10 years. And yeah, it's been a real fun journey, and I'm really passionate about the medium and about getting people involved in the medium and providing resources, which includes these monthly office hours as well as a production handbook that you can get for free at atypicalartist.co/resources. So go and get that if you haven't gotten it already. Okay, the chat should be working on YouTube. I will do my best to follow things on TikTok. I'm still like pretty new to streaming on TikTok, so I'm kind of just like doing it secondarily. But please ask me your questions. I've got some questions from the online form that I will be getting to that I haven't gotten to in the past. But I do like to prioritize the live questions so that I can, answer any follow-ups that you might have, etc. So please go ahead and ask those in the chat. And I'm just going to make sure that the chat is actually on and working. Okay, it seems to be. Fantastic. Okay, so first question. Let me go to my little spreadsheet here. Oh, great. Okay, actually, I got a live question on TikTok. Hey, Lauren, can you suggest some fiction podcasts for teens? Yes, I can. There are a lot of really, really great fiction podcasts out there for teens. A great place to start is Gen Z Media has a lot of really great podcasts for teens that span a bunch of different genres. 6 Minutes is probably their most popular podcast and is really wonderful. And a new season, I believe, is going to be coming out soon for 6 Minutes, so definitely check that out. I made a YA mystery called Maxine Miles. It's like a choose your own ending mystery. So when you get to episode 9, you're given a choice of 3 endings, and then you choose. And it didn't get renewed for season 2, so I made an HTML game to kind of like wrap up the cliffhangers from the ending. So it's like interactive in that way, which I think is fun and hopefully like fun for teens. And so, yeah, Gen Z Media is great. I think Maxine Miles is fun. One of my favorite fiction podcasts for young people is The Disappearance of Mars Patel. So, yeah, there's lots of really, really great stuff out there. But yeah, I would start with Gen Z because they specifically make media for teenagers, fiction podcasts for teenagers, which is great. Okay, we got a question in the YouTube chat from Patrick. Thank you for joining again, Patrick. It's always wonderful to see you in these live streams. Hey, Lauren, what stage are you at with 2000 and Late? What do you foresee being your biggest challenge this time around? Yes, so 2000 and Late is my newest original. It's going to be coming out in less than 2 weeks, which is crazy. The trailer goes live on Monday. And if you're an Atypical and a supporter of Atypical Artists, the first episode will also go live on Monday. But for everybody else, September 8th, episodes 1 and 2 are going to be released. And then it'll be weekly through Halloween, with episodes coming out on Monday. But then the final week, episode 9 will be on Monday, and episode 10, the finale, will be on Halloween because I thought that would be fun. 2000 Late is my newest original about sorry, I'm like looking at the TikTok chat. I don't know how like full-time streamers do this stuff and like divide their attention. And I also still don't like really understand TikTok. So 2000 Late is a story about a woman who in her mid-30s is possessed by a demon and uses her demonic powers to unionize her workplace. That's like the quickest and broadest definition I can, or summary I can give of it. And yeah, we are fully into post-production, obviously, because the show's coming out in 2 weeks. And I've, like prepped all of the marketing stuff. I've sent out the first episode to a bunch of like friends and colleagues to get like an early listen and hopefully some blurbs. And I think the biggest challenge for me for this one is, honestly, it's like what the biggest challenge is all the time with making a fiction podcast, which is like, how do I get people to listen to this? And this is really the first like full cast audio drama of my own, like independently made podcast that I've made, or actually even just like a full cast original, because Maxine Miles was funded by iHeart. But since I've made Since Maxine Miles, because the two other shows that I've made with Atypical, my company, in the last 2 years have been Breaker Whiskey, which is a totally solo show. It's just me. And then New Year's Day, which I love, but which is like kind of like funky. It only comes out once a year, and it's with two of my best friends and colleagues, Brigham Snow and Andrew Nowak. So like this is the first time that like I've released like a season of like, it's the full cast, it's the full sound design, it's like ambitious, it's very different, it's an entirely new idea. It's a traditional sort of 10 episode first season. And the landscape of marketing and of engaging with an audience has changed so much in the last couple of years. Like Twitter's gone. Like I haven't been on Twitter in years. I am no longer on Instagram and Facebook because I still hold my accounts there because I don't want anybody taking the usernames, but I haven't opened either of those apps. I don't even have those apps on my phone anymore, because once Meta decided to stop fact checking, I was like, well, I'm divesting myself of this entire company and completely. And I'm still on Tumblr. I'm still on Reddit. I'm like trying to figure out this TikTok thing. But yeah, it is. I think that's like the biggest challenge, because that's always the biggest challenge, right? It's getting ears, especially because now, wonderfully, fiction podcasting is a much more like saturated place than it was when I first started the Bright Sessions way back in 2015. And so there's just like a lot more, options for people to listen to. And so getting people to listen to your show and spend time with you is always a challenge. I also think that like in a lot of ways, this show is like very different from anything I've made before. And actually, someone in the TikTok chat asked, are we going to hear some familiar voice actors you worked with before? And for the most part, the answer to that is no. So I very intentionally, with 2008, wanted to work with entirely new to me actors. So everyone in the cast pretty much are actors that I met because they auditioned. And I really, really like just, it's been such a delight to work with them. But I have worked with so many of the same actors for so many years that I really wanted to expand my network and work with people I hadn't worked with before. And they're all incredible. And I'm so excited for you guys to fall in love with them all. There is one exception. Emma Shajarko from Wolf 359 and a bunch of other things is an amazing actress and a dear friend. And she plays a role that comes in the last 2 episodes, who would be a much bigger role in the second season, but sort of comes in towards the end of the first season. And Emma and I have known each other for 10 years. We have oftentimes like sort of cross paths in terms of working, but I've never actually like directly worked with her. And so like I cheated a little bit on that one, in the sense that I was like, oh, I finally want to work with Emma, and so I'm gonna ask her to do this role. But everyone else is totally new. And so like, and that's in part because this show is very, very different from anything I've done before. It's a lot in many ways, it's a lot more cynical. It's a show that's directly engaged with our current political moment, which is something I've never done before. It's in our world exactly as it is, just with the reality that there's also demons, or at least one demon. And so that's really, really different for me. And it's not necessarily going to leave you like in a warm and fuzzy place in the way that some of my other stuff maybe does. So yeah, I think that's my biggest challenge, is that also like I am nervous about what my existing audience is going to think of it, because it's quite different for me in some ways. Or maybe I'm also overthinking that. Maybe it's not actually that different and people are going to like it. But I think, yeah, it's just getting people to listen. So that's the biggest challenge as I see it now. Patrick, geez, you just kicked the audio drama machine into overdrive, huh? Amazing that you can make something that fast. Yeah, I mean, like, honestly, given the right, budget and motivation and collaborators, I can turn around a podcast in 6 months, which is essentially what I've done for this. And that's, in part that we're doing post-production actively as we're releasing. Jeffrey Nils Gardiner, my amazing sound designer for this project, was down to do that because they knew that I really wanted to like sort of launch the show with the trailer on Labor Day and then have it end on Halloween, because it is about a demon unionizing a workplace. And I was like, I like that bookend. And then also Patrick Ellis, my executive producer, has just been like so supportive and so wonderful at facilitating the entire thing that it's been possible to do this in this kind of really truncated time. And I just have lots of practice having done that in the past for other projects, but I definitely am tired. Okay. Okay. I'm going to get to your question, Rachel, but I just want to follow up on Patrick's follow-up question here. Do you plan on doing any kind of guerrilla marketing for 2000 Late, maybe live events or something along those lines, or just anything new related to promotion that's on your playbook? Great question. I mean, I'm always thinking about guerrilla marketing, and like certainly I posted the casting call on TikTok, which is actually how a lot of actors found the casting call and ended up submitting for audition, because it ended up getting like 100,050 views or something like that. And people seem to really like the idea. And so I'm planning to kind of like hopefully find creative ways to promote it on TikTok, which isn't really something I've done. Like I posted all of the episodes of Breaker Whiskey on TikTok just kind of as an experiment, but I didn't really like it wasn't really promotion. It was just sort of like treating TikTok like YouTube because those episodes were so short. But for this, like I really want to get creative about it. And in terms of live events, live events are something that I would really love to do and something I've never done for any of my shows before. But they are, it's an entirely different like arm of production, right? Like it's just an entirely different thing. And of course, like the wonderful thing about getting to do remote productions, as we did with 2000 Late, is that the entire cast is spread across the country. And so like, a live show with most of the cast would be impossible. That said, I do play the two main characters. I play the main character and the demon that lives inside of her. So it's like, in some ways, I could maybe do a live show. But in terms of guerrilla marketing, I have thought about, sort of putting up like, fake like sort of, unionizing posters and things like that. But I also like don't want to like, there is so much like great real organizing going on right now that it's like, I don't want to like confuse that with sort of a bit. So I don't know. I mean, like, I think my strategy is really going to be just to do what I've always done, which is try and connect with, the audience where they're at and be enthusiastic and, talk about making the show and talk about what it means to me. The one new piece of sort of marketing or sort of discussion around the show that's something I've never done before is making an after show. So the episodes come out on Monday, and then on Friday there's a little chat with myself and somebody who like is doing something really cool out in the world, whether that's organizing, whether that's, working for advocacy groups, whether it's, working for a legal aid group, whatever, there's a variety of folks I've talked to, and just to kind of give a little hope back into the podcast feed in this sort of like cynical show about our current moment, and talking to people who are like, really doing something concrete and interesting and valuable in the world. And so I'm excited to sort of see how that fits into like the overall marketing strategy, because that is like a very different thing from anything I've done in the past. So we'll see how that goes. But like, I always like try to make marketing plans so that like I am not just flying by the seat of my pants. But then I often find that even when I make the marketing plans, I end up straying from them and sort of just reacting in real time to people and sort of, as the ideas come up, as the episodes come out. So I imagine that I'll kind of just be doing that. And I think the other really important thing to remember about audio drama is that like the real marketing campaign begins after the last episode of the season premieres, right? Because it's like so many people wait for the whole season to be out to listen to the entire thing. Fiction podcasts are evergreen. Like there's never a bad time for somebody to get into a fiction podcast. I still am actively marketing the Bright Sessions. That show started 10 years ago and ended 4 or 5 years ago. And people are still finding it every single month. Like our monthly numbers have not gone down immensely since the show ended. And so, yeah, it's really just about, kind of like keeping the momentum and finding ways to potentially market it in a guerrilla way, like after the fact, like after the show is complete, or the first season is complete, because I do want to do a second season. Okay. Let's see. I have another question from Chimso in the class about the nicheness of audio fiction, which I do want to talk about because I actually was just talking about that on Tumblr. But first, Rachel, thank you, Patrick. I'm so glad that this is useful. Thank you for always showing up and asking such great questions. Okay. Rachel asks, hi, Lauren. I know in the past you've mentioned playlists being a big part of your writing process. What recommendations do you have for using music in the writing process? Yes, playlists are a big part of my writing process. I actually have a playlist spreadsheet because that's the kind of weirdo that I am. And let's see, like of my completed writing playlists of projects, I've got about 100 playlists from projects over the last 10 years. And those are playlists for characters, those are playlists for shows, those are playlists for ships, those are playlists for, you know, seasons, kind of a bunch of different things related to the story. And that's always where I start. And so like for me, like if you're somebody who like knows what a blorbo is, right? Like you're somebody who like gets obsessed with like a TV character or like a book series or something like that, then you know that feeling of like being really into, or like honestly, actually, like even if you like when you have like a crush, right, on someone and you hear a song and you're like, and just every song reminds you of that person. Right. I think everybody's like had that experience. Like every love song becomes about your crush. Every angst song becomes about your favorite ship from a book series, you know? And so that's just like kind of the way that I move through life all the time with like the little people that live in my head. And so that's really where I start. Like as I'm developing an idea, as I'm thinking about the characters, fleshing them out, I'll hear a song and it'll just sort of like switch on that light and I'll be like, okay, it's what I call like usually is what ends up being the keystone song of the playlist. So there's usually like a song on the playlist that sort of the entire playlist is like built up around. And that usually then points me in a direction of like genre or like flavor of song or like time period or what have you, because I like the playlist to be cohesive. I will say, so I think that like what a playlist is can be like a little bit different depending on who you are and like what generation you were born in. So like for me, like a playlist is a mix CD, right? And so it's like I'm not making playlists that are over 18 songs long because like mix CDs, you like maybe could squeeze like 16 to 18 songs on there if the songs were short, but like you had a limit. And of course, you know, before that, 8 tracks, mixtapes, you know, you had eight songs, maybe 10 songs. And so the sort of like Spotify playlist of like, here is 4 hours of music that like fits this very specific vibe. That's not what I'm doing. Like I am, and not to say that like, that's not good or that you can't do that if that works for you. But for me, the playlist is like a story that I'm building in song that like speaks to a particular character or speaks to a particular story beat. And so I think like maybe starting there in terms of like how to use music for your writing process. Like, are you a person who likes to painstakingly craft a playlist from track to track and make sure that it builds, make sure that it, you know, it's got an arc to it, make sure that the genres fit together, make sure there's no jarring move from one, you know, like, are you the kind of person who makes a playlist that cannot and should not be put on shuffle? I think is like maybe the best way to put that. Or are you a person that's like, I just want like a whole like hodgepodge of music that like all makes me think about this idea and I just want it to be mixed up and like surprise me. And so I think like, you know, as you're sitting down to write, trying out a couple of different things, like, you know, I don't actually use Spotify, I use Apple Music, but like I think that Spotify can be a great place to like find like very specific kinds of vibes. So like, let's say you're writing a story about like childhood best friends who have a huge falling out, right? Like, I don't know, search like childhood friend angst on Spotify and like see what that yields for you and put it on and start writing and see kind of what works for you. And I would say like the two big things to think about when finding music for like, or finding how music works into your writing process is figuring out if you're somebody who can listen to something with lyrics while you write or someone who can't listen to lyrics while you write, or if it doesn't matter. I know lots of people who like cannot, I know lots of people who like just can't listen to anything at all when they write. I also know somebody who writes exclusively to NPR, like to the radio, and then edits to Christmas music. Like that's just what this one author does, and like I love that. I think it's amazing. I could not do that. And then I know people who like only write to like film scores or like only write to classical music or any music or like house music, like any music that just doesn't have lyrics at all. I like writing to music with lyrics. But usually I sort of have to like know the song so well that it kind of just gets like buried back there. It just sort of like it enters like a different part of my mind. Like I'm not actively trying to sing along to it in my head or whatever, or out loud. Although sometimes I sort of am doing that while writing without sort of realizing it. So I think kind of figuring out like what's distracting to you, what's helpful for you. And for me, I mean, I think like, well, and Gabrielle Urbina and I did a stream the other day, and we were talking about this a little bit, like what our writing processes are. And like for him, he's like, I just have to go somewhere. Like I have to like go out into the world to like a coffee shop or like some other like location to write. Whereas for me, it's like I have to like put on my playlists, right? And like that's the thing that like tricks my brain into like, okay, we are writing now. And for some people, it's like the coffee or the tea that they need to have, or like the candle that they need to light, or the particular like desk that they need to sit at. And so I think like figuring out whatever your version of like the sort of like mind hypnotism that you have to do to yourself, like that's kind of how I think of it. Cause like I'll put like, sometimes I'll just like put one song from my playlist like on repeat for like an hour, and I'll churn out like a good chunk of like a script or a book or something like that. Like I wrote this queer outlaw novel that is currently out on submission, and like Paper Moon by Hunter Metz, I think it was like my like second top listened to song that year, or maybe my top, because like I literally just like put it on repeat for like 2 hours and wrote like 3 chapters. So it's like figuring out kind of whatever like the trick that your brain needs to sort of click into, and then just like doing that again and again and again for new stuff. Yeah, and I think like going out and seeking out new music, is a big piece of that too. Also, like, going, like, just sometimes I put my entire iTunes on shuffle, because I've been building a music catalog and music collection for 20 years. And so it's like sometimes, there's a song that I really loved when I was 17 that I'm like, oh my God, like this is perfect for like this thing or whatever. So yeah, that would be my recommendation. It's just like try a bunch of things to kind of figure out what it does for you, if it does anything at all for you, and then just like continue to build on that, and eventually you'll sort of come to a process that like really works for you. I hope that was helpful, Rachel. Great question. Okay. Okay, so Chimzo's got a couple of, oh no, okay, so many things are popping up on TikTok. Okay, so Chimzo, you asked about the nicheness of audio drama, and also talking about script writing for audio drama. Yeah, so I mean, the niche quality. Oh, good, Rachel. I'm glad that was helpful. Thank you. The niche quality of fiction podcasting is something that also actually Gabrielle and I were talking about last week on our stream. Just the fact that like certain fiction podcasts like Welcome to Night Vale or the Magnus Archives have kind of broken containment on places like Tumblr, where they've like gone from being in a niche fandom to being like a big fandom on Tumblr, but they haven't really like broken containment like out of that. Like, I mean, maybe there are audio dramas that are big on TikTok. Like, I don't know if like Welcome to Night Vale or the Magnus Archives are big on TikTok, because like, TikTok serves me the content that it serves me. And for some reason, no matter how much I try to make videos about audio drama, it just does not serve me audio drama content, which leads me to believe that maybe there isn't a lot of audio drama content on there. I know there's some, but I mean, like, I think it's just like an awareness thing, right? Like, I think that, I mean, without getting like too deep into sort of like my perspective on the current media landscape and how social media has kind of like both been a boon to independent artists and also sort of like poisoned the way that we think about art. Without getting into all of that, I just think that like fiction podcasts are a little bit hard to engage in online because there's no visual aspect, and they're very hard to turn into like a TikTok sound, right? Like there's very few sort of like moments from audio drama that would like work well as a TikTok sound. And so like, unlike, like music or whatever, like a music artist becoming big on TikTok, or like somebody talking about their book and that becoming big on TikTok, because people sort of like know what a book is. Like, I know that sounds like an insane thing to say, but like if someone is on Twitter or Blue Sky or whatever, or TikTok talking about like, here's the book that I'm writing, or here's the book that I had that just came out, and here's why you're going to like it. People are like, okay, I know what that means. Like, I know I can like go to my local bookstore or go to Libby or go to Kindle or whatever and like get a copy of this book and read it. And I know what that experience is going to be like. And based off of what the writer is saying about their book, like, I think I might like it. Whereas there is still an awareness campaign that needs to happen around like what fiction podcasts are and the fact that they exist. Like that is genuinely still a barrier for a lot of people. Like I still have content, like still have conversations to this day with people where I tell them what I do and they're like, oh, like you mean like like a old school radio drama, or like they don't even actually necessarily always know to even ask that question. Like maybe I'll be able to get into it by being like, actual play podcasts. It's like that, but scripted. But like there are plenty of people who like listen to like Taz or some other like big huge actual play podcast, but like they still have never heard of a fiction podcast. Like that is still very much a thing that happens in the real world. And so like I can get onto TikTok and talk about the podcast that I made, and people can dig it, and like half the time they're like, well, where is it? And I'm like, well, it's where, like, it's a fiction podcast. It's where you get your podcasts. Like I don't really like, I don't know how to so I think that like that's a huge reason why they're niche, is that just like only in the last like 2 years have the majority of Americans been listening to podcasts at all. And so the fact that there's like this niche even within this niche of fiction podcasts, I think is sort of the biggest barrier to it becoming more of like a mainstream thing. And so like tell your friends about fiction podcasts, get them to listen. And then, I think that there's a lot of things around like attention and how easy it is to promote something that's just audio and that isn't necessarily like quippy on social media sites where people are mostly getting their, art recommendations from. That's a whole other conversation. But script writing for audio drama. I mean, like I would say, I think I've done a lot of consulting with folks who are adapting a TV pilot or a feature film or a play to audio. And I've worked with a lot of playwrights and screenwriters and authors to kind of onboard them to the process of writing for audio only. And I think the thing that always surprises them, that always like takes a little bit of convincing, is the fact that like anything that you want to do on screen or on stage or in a book, you can do in audio. There are no limitations to what you can do in audio in the same way that there are no limitations to what you can do in a book, right? Like you can write a huge space explosion in a book, and like not only is that easy to, well, I mean, it's not easy to write that, but like not only is that like totally feasible, but also like doesn't cost you any more than like writing a conversation with two people in the same room, right? Which is very, very different from like film, where it's like, I mean, depending on who the two people are, how much you're paying for them to talk in a room, a space explosion might be cheaper. But there's like a lot less sort of logistical stuff to figure out. But I still think that people sort of come into audio being like, well, sure, like I this action sequence on film would be expensive, but like you would know what was going on. And it's like, well, why can't you know what's going on in the audio? Like you just need to find a way to write it that makes sense. And you need to find a way to get at the action and get at the excitement in a way that makes sense in audio. I wrote a show for Marvel many years ago that was an adaptation of the 90s graphic novel Marvels. And if you've seen the most recent Fantastic Four movie, which I really enjoyed, especially because like that's that particular Fantastic Four story from the 60s of Galactus and the Silver Surfer and everything is one that is probably the Marvel comic that I know best, because that is essentially what I was adapting for this show that I did for Marvel. And so I've like read that over and over again. I've marked it up, et cetera, et cetera. But like like the Silver Surfer arriving and like Galactus arriving and destroying the city and everything, like I wrote all of that in audio. And like I wrote, like Spider-Man in audio. And we just had to figure out a way to do it where it's like, okay, like how are you going to know that the Silver Surfer is sort of coming through the sky of fire, right? Like what is that going to sound like? How are people on the ground going to react in a way that tells the audience, what's going on, but also that feels natural? And, for Marvels in particular, we ended up using a framing device, right? Because like Marvels is ultimately a graphic novel about the people on the ground sort of witnessing stuff like Galactus or the X-Men or what have you. It's about this photographer and sort of his story and his journey of being a photographer, documenting all of these things. And so like we just took that and expanded on that by making his assistant, Marcia, the main character, and by giving her, she wasn't as interested in still photography. She wanted to make a documentary. And so it's like she's going to be interviewing people. She's going to be doing commentary over the film, like kind of using that framing device to sort of tell that story. Oh, excuse me. And yeah, I think like that is why you have a lot of fiction podcasts that have framing devices, but I also don't think that you need them necessarily. And so I think just like not being scared of the medium is like really the first step, right? Like just acknowledging that you can do whatever you want to do in audio. You just might need to think about outside the box about it. And then I think really focusing on the elements of audio drama that are at your disposal. So like by that, I mean, if you're writing a screenplay, you have certain resources at your disposal that are going to be communicating your story, right? You have the actors, you have their costumes, you have the set that they're standing in, you have the props that they are interacting with, you have the score that is under the scene, you have the lighting, you have the framing, you have the editing and the pace of the editing and the shots that the movie is cutting between, right? You've got all of these different elements. And then of course you've got the script and you've got the direction. And all of those things come together to communicate an idea from moment to moment, right? And like I think if you were sort of interested in like learning more about like how all of those elements fit together, like obviously there are like some really, really great books about filmmaking out there. But I also would recommend just like, if you can, and like I am a scaredy cat, so like my filmography of you know what I viewed is limited, but like horror movies are genuinely so great at this. Like there's such a clarity of purpose to each element in a movie in horror films that I think can just like really help you kind of learn to identify these things. So like, for instance, Sinners. Like Sinners is a movie that everybody's seen this year. It's fantastic. We all agree it's amazing. And it uses all of its elements incredibly well, right? Like obviously the actors are all incredible. The costumes are gorgeous. The sets are gorgeous. The lighting's amazing. The special effects are incredible. The story is great. The script is great. But also like, you know, music is this huge element of it. And like the way that the camera is moving through the room in the big musical sequence in the middle of the movie, like that tells you so much information that like the script just like cannot tell you, right? Or won't tell you in this and evoke the same emotion. And then of course you have like the moments of scares and what those are doing. And so I think that like, or like any Jordan Peele movie, right? Like Get Out, Us, Nope. Oh God, I love Nope. And like I think, you know, like the classic thing of like, you know, the growing score, and then there's the big sting of music, and there's a fake out scare, and then there's the sort of relaxing of tension, and then the character turns around and there's the real scare, right? Like that's like a very, very classic horror movie sort of, you know, step to take. And I think that it's really worthwhile to watch like old Hitchcock movies, The Ring, Jordan Peele movies, The Thing, and like kind of see how they are all playing with those different elements, and how specifically like we were watching the first couple of episodes of Alien Earth, the new Alien spinoff TV show, and like, you know, Alien is like this huge creature, and at one point, you know, this isn't really a spoiler, there's like a statue behind the character that we're focused on, and like your mind instantly sees the shape of the alien in that statue, and you're like, holy shit, that thing's gonna move like any second now. Or like, you know, when it's like up on the ceiling and you sort of see it out of the corner of your eye, thinking about all of that stuff, right? And how you're sort of communicating things sort of in the foreground and the background. So watch all those movies, and then watch Blair Witch Project and watch how it does all of those things. That's, I think, one of my favorite like movies. I think it's one of the best horror movies ever made. I think it's an incredible movie. I think the way that it was made and its legacy is like unbelievably interesting. There's a great Panic World podcast episode about Blair Witch that is worth listening to. And the thing about Blair Witch is that like there are no jump scares. There are no special effects. You never see a monster. There's no score. There's no real directing. because the actors were left alone with their cameras. So there's no cinematography or DP. There's no director of photography on set saying this is the best way to frame this shot. This is the way to communicate sort of the the information and keep people scared. There's just like the woods, these three actors, and what the editor put together after the fact, right? And the way that the film's edited together. And it is so bone-chillingly terrifying. And I'm talking about like horror specifically and horror films specifically, because I think that there's a really good reason that audio drama and horror have sort of been in lockstep and have been such a sort of a symbiotic relationship for audio drama's existence in the modern age, right? Like horror is probably the biggest, most dominant genre in audio drama. And it's because something is so much scarier when you can't see it, which is a lesson that Blair Witch understood incredibly well. And horror is also something that you can really effectively make with very few elements. And so like, I'm getting back around to sort of my like writing for audio drama point here, which is you've got all of these amazing horror films, both movies like Psycho or The Birds, all the way to like the modern age with Nope and Get Out and Sinners. And they're working with the entire palette of like filmmaking and all of the elements that you have with all of these incredibly talented people working at the top of their field, making something really frightening and really exciting and really compelling. And then you have Blair Witch, where they're like playing with like three of the tools that filmmaking gives you. And it's brilliant. And so I think that like taking that lesson and then thinking about audio and like what are the elements that you have to work with in audio? You have the script, you have the actors and the way that they're directed, you have the way that the audio is edited together, you've got sound effects. If you have the capacity and resources for it, you have a score. Score can do so much in audio drama. I think a great example of this, I'm going to brag about one of my own shows. Season 6 of The Bright Sessions, I think, has one of my like favorite scores of any audio drama ever. Evan Cunningham, my longtime collaborator, just like absolutely killed it on that score. And it adds so much to that show. And that was really the first show that I wrote that had a full score. And like, I had an amazing writer's room for that show, for that season. And I was already feeling very good about the show and the performances because I just work with the best actors in the world always. But then like hearing it with the score, I was like, holy shit, like this is exciting on a level that like none of my other writing has ever been because the score is like doing so much. Even though I was sort of familiar with all of these other elements, having Misha Stanton sound design, like I knew it was going to be exciting and thrilling and all this kind of stuff. But like the score really elevated it to a new level for me personally listening to it. But that's like one of the few times I've had the luxury to like pay somebody to fully score a show. So I'm going to kind of like leave out score now in terms of like thinking about how to script write for audio drama because like it's not a reliable resource. But sound effects, editing, dialogue, your actors, your director, all of those things are a huge piece of the resources that you have at your disposal with audio drama. The other big asset that you have in writing audio drama that, yes, won't become like super relevant until you're into directing and editing, but that you still should be thinking about all the time when you're writing is silence. Silence is massive. When to use it, how much to use it, the sort of absence of dialogue, those pauses, those beats, right? Like having like beat in a film script is very common, but like that is a much bigger element in audio than it is in anything else. And so when you're writing scripts, thinking about the pauses, thinking about the rhythm of the script, of the scenes. Similarly, obviously, all of the best TV shows and films and plays and books have wonderful dialogue. But the differentiation between your character voices in audio also becomes much more significant when you're working just in audio. For instance, Aaron Sorkin. I have some opinions about the guy, but I love a lot of his stuff. I love The West Wing. I think The Social Network is a fantastic movie. I think he's written a lot of fantastic movies, actually. You could probably take an average episode of The West Wing, swap all of the characters' lines, with maybe the exception of President Bartlett, and get basically the same exact episode. And like this is not an accusation that I'm making toward him for the first time. A lot of people have criticized this about his work, that all of his characters kind of talk the same, and it's just because like Aaron Sorkin has like a very, very specific voice. And like that voice is awesome. Like I love listening to his dialogue. It's like incredibly fast, it's incredibly sharp-witted, it's incredibly intelligent, it's really fun on the ear. But if you were doing that in audio only and you didn't have the actors and the way that they look and their facial expressions and their body language and the way that they were interacting with each other, I think a lot of the magic, if you didn't have the walk and talk, right? I think a lot of the magic of his dialogue would kind of fall a little bit flatter. And that's because in audio, you need each of the characters' voices to be very distinct. And that's both a writing thing and eventually a casting thing, of course, like vocal diversity, not just in sort of the our typical diversity sense, which of course is also very important in audio, but specifically voices sounding different is really important in audio, because it is sort of the main element. So I think like thinking about silence, thinking about the character voice being different, and thinking about pacing are sort of like the main things that I would really focus on when you're writing a script for audio. That was the longest way to answer that question. But great question. I love that question. And I think if folks have more specific questions about writing like specific scenes or specific types of dynamics or specific set pieces in audio, please ask those questions, because it's a little bit hard to talk about generally, but those would be sort of the big takeaways I would say. Audio atmosphere is extremely pertinent from TikTok. Yes, absolutely. Atmosphere is huge. I'm so glad you love the bright sessions. Thank you. Okay. So now I'm going to go into my spreadsheet of questions, because I haven't gotten to those at all in the last couple of streams. Okay, there's a couple of technical questions that folks have submitted through the website that I'm going to save for next month. At the end of September, last Wednesday of September, I'm going to be doing this live stream. So I will not be live streaming on TikTok because I don't know how to do that with multiple people. But go to atypicalartist.co/create to get all the information for the YouTube live stream. I will be doing it with Brad Colebrook, the amazing sound designer and audio drama creator, and we're going to be talking about more of the technical stuff, because that is more of Brad's purview, and Brad had reached out and offered to hop on and sort of take care of those questions with me. So submit your technical questions, and I promise for those of you who have submitted them previously, I will be getting to that. Okay. Moving into... okay, this is I think kind of related question to the writing question, just a little bit more specific. Okay, someone asked, I'm creating a serialized audio drama in the style of a modern day soap opera with a large ensemble cast. How do you recommend balancing character introductions and storylines in the first few episodes so that it doesn't overwhelm listeners? And then they have a question about growth, which I'll try to get to as well. So yes, lots of characters. What I was just talking about with writing and also with casting, of having vocal diversity, making sure your character voices are distinct, making sure your actors' voices are distinct, is, I think, crucial in making sure that people can keep those characters straight. And then also the pace at which you introduce those characters, I think, is crucial. I sort of have an unofficial rule where I don't introduce more than 5 main characters in a first episode. So that's not to say that a first episode can't have, 14 characters in it. I just can't write 14 characters that I want the audience to remember in that episode. A character can appear, who then will become a bigger character later on. But for instance, for 2000 and Late, the show that I have coming out in a couple of weeks, in the first episode, that is, it really is a show about this woman and the demon that lives inside of her. And so in some ways it's a two-hander, because most of the show, every scene has the two of them, and most of the show is the two of them. But but beyond that, it is really an ensemble cast of, in different sort of configurations. There's probably 6-7 recurring characters that you really want to be familiar with out of a cast of 13, right? And that when they show up, you need to know who they are, you need to recognize their voice, etc. And in the first episode, I think I introduce 4 of them. So there's that kind of that limit, right? And then the next episode, I introduce 2 more. And then the next episode, I introduced the remaining 3. And so I think thinking about pacing that out in that way, or and not trying to introduce more than 5 characters in the first episode is really, really helpful. And then also, like, the thing that I really rely on in audio that, like, you don't really do in real life. Like, I don't really, like, say people's names in real life when I'm talking to them. You know, like, some people do. You know, I've certainly met people who do use my name a lot when they're talking to me. But, like, at least to my ear, it kind of, like, sticks out sometimes in conversation if somebody, like, sort of says, like, you know, well, that's a good point, Lauren. You know, it's like I don't personally really talk that way. And most of my, like, close friends don't talk that way. You know, we'll say each other's names sometimes, or, like, nicknames or whatever, but usually to, like, call attention or to, like, you know, whatever. In audio, people are saying each other's names all the time. You know, it's like I really overuse characters using each other's names. And that it can be, like, a good kind of shortcut to that. So that would be my recommendation there. In terms of storylines, I mean, similarly, like, just really pace it out. Like, I think having, like, really making it clear what your A storyline is in episode 1, introducing the seeds of a B storyline, bulking up the B storyline in episode 2, maybe introducing a C storyline. I think if you want to do, like, you know, a bunch of different storylines, a bunch of different intercutting stories, you absolutely can. You know, I think just, like, think about what each of those storylines is doing and how many sort of characters are involved, how many elements are involved. Because I think that, like, yeah, it can be easy for folks to get overwhelmed. I think a great example of a show that does this really well is Red Valley, which is one of my favorite shows that I've sort of caught up on in the last year or so. Really, really fantastic. And, like, just really, like, bold and bonkers in terms of, like, the amount of storylines and the amount of time jumps that show juggles. It is about being cryogenically frozen, and so they do a lot of big time jumps. And they also, like, the show begins with a main character, right? And, like, and a person that you're following, and then, like, like, some other characters that are introduced. But by season 4, like, any given episode, you're going to be with a different set of people, and, like, they're going to be doing something, and you're going to be along for the ride. And, you know, some of the characters you've been following for a while, some will be new. They'll be in a totally new circumstance. It might be years, it might be, you know, a lot of years later. But they're able to do that, I think, because of the pace at which they introduce the characters and the storylines, and also the sort of the main cast that you need to know never gets, like, enormous, right? It's never, like, 20 characters that you need to know all of them. You know, it's like 7 that you're sort of, like, really honed in on. So yeah, listen to Red Valley because it's a great podcast, and also, like, I think it does this thing quite well. Okay. Ghoul Wrangler, great name, and TikTok asked, do these lives get uploaded anywhere afterwards? Yes, they get uploaded to Atypical Artists YouTube channel. So just search Atypical Artists on YouTube, or go to atypicalartist.co/create, and you'll get a link to the live stream channel. I've only been doing these since May, so there's not a ton of them, but I do them the last Wednesday of every month. So check out, you know, atypicalartist.co/create for updates on, like, what time they are each month. I'm also getting, like, it's getting so bright in this YouTube video. I'm looking like I'm glowing, but nothing I can do about that. The sun's coming out. Okay, I want to finish up this question from the spreadsheet because this person also asked, as I develop my show for long-term growth, what do producers or platforms typically want to see in a pitch for a serialized audio drama? Are there specific materials or metrics that really stand out? So I assume you mean in sort of, like, seeking out potential, like, funding or distribution with, like, a platform. And then also Patrick Hyde, great to see you in here again, asks, do you look for sponsors for your projects? So, and, like, knowing how long I take to answer a single question, I have a feeling these will be the last questions that I answer on this stream. Also because, like, this is a very, very big subject. Oh, fantastic, Ghoul Wrangler. The Atypical email brought you here. Awesome. Yeah. Then you have the link to the YouTube channel, and all of them are in a playlist called Audio Drama Office Hours. So you can find those on the Atypical channel. Yeah. So sponsors, finding distribution, what's the best way to grow your show? What's the best way to get people invested in your show? This has changed a lot in my 10 years of making audio drama, and it's changed a lot in the last few years. The sort of like triple whammy of WGA strike, SAG strike, COVID, and sort of, I guess, quadruple whammy of the advertising industry changing immensely have left audio drama in kind of like a funky place when it comes to all of this stuff, in the sense that like there primarily are two places that are still commissioning original audio fiction, and it's the BBC and Audible. And like there are some exceptions to that. Like there are sort of one-off projects here and there from companies, but those are really few and far between, and not necessarily like reliable. And so in terms of like finding a producer or a platform that is going to like pay for your season, or finding a sponsor that is going to fund you enough to sort of like cover all of your costs, is quite hard. Especially because just getting host-read advertising on podcasts at all right now is quite hard. I will say the sort of like understood wisdom / my experience is like, you're not going to get a sponsor on a first season of a fiction podcast. Like, unless you have a huge celebrity in the mix, honestly, even then, hard to say. Yeah, like I think it's just like the days of like GE making The Message as like a big, sort of presenting sponsor, like those days I think are well behind us, which is too bad because the reason that soap operas are called soap operas is because when they started on the radio, they were sponsored by soap companies. And that used to be kind of like, it would be like GE presents this and Dove soap presents this. It wasn't Dove at that point, but you know what I mean? That is kind of not really a thing as much anymore. Not to say that it can't happen, and not to say that you still shouldn't pursue it. And certainly, I've been pursuing it for various things, but it's tricky. In terms of like metrics or materials that folks want to see. And I'll sort of like step out this question a little bit around, like how do I pitch my podcast as I'm growing it to folks, to like, how can you get a publisher interested in doing spin-off books, right? Like that's like I pitched, the Bright Sessions books around. How can you get a TV studio interested in adapting it? How can you get a sponsor interested in sponsoring your third season? How can you get a network interested in distributing you? I think if you're looking for like a platform for distribution, the person who asked this particular question, what do producers or platforms typically want to see in a pitch for a serialized audio drama? I don't totally know what you mean by producers or platforms. By producers, I'm assuming you mean like, like if Atypical was in the business of like producing other people's shows still, what would I want to see? That kind of thing. And we're not, because we don't have the money. And, I think that's kind of common across the board. But of course, there are fiction networks that do distribution. Fable and Folly, Rusty Quill, in terms of pitching to them and getting them to do advertising for you and things like that. I mean, like I just say, like, start the conversation. Like they actually, in my understanding, are in the business of like taking on shows in their first season to distribute them and arrange ads for them, because that's more of like a sort of mutual partnership, right? Where it's like they're kind of taking you onto their network and taking on maybe some administrative load, and then you're splitting any advertising profit you're making, but like nobody's necessarily like getting paid up front or like spending money up front. You're just sort of saying like, okay, like we're gonna do this together, and we're gonna sort of go out and find advertisers or do programmatic ads, which are like the pre-recorded ads that you hear on podcasts mostly these days. It's mostly what's in the Atypical feeds right now because folks aren't buying host-read ads on fiction podcasts or any podcast that's not hosted by a celebrity. So yeah, I mean, like I think in terms of materials, in my experience and sort of anecdotally, you want to have probably, well, I don't even know if that's true anymore. I think for host read ads, it used to be that sort of you needed 30,000 downloads an episode consistently to kind of like meet the threshold of getting host read ads. I think probably it's closer to like 50 to 80 now. Usually when we do host read ads, like the thing that they're looking for is like 50,000. And again, like those things are not happening at the same volume that they used to be happening. So I don't know if that's because the number has gone up or if they're just buying less inventory or what. But yes, so I think like growing your show to anywhere from 10 to 50,000 listens an episode within the first 30 days of that episode's launch is really like kind of, what you want to be looking at. From a metric standpoint, any metrics that you have around things like merch sales is always going to be appealing to people, right? If they see that people are spending money on your thing, if you have a Patreon and you've got like 2,000 patrons, like that's going to be interesting to any producer or production company or platform. And then I think for things like I think, the Bright Sessions books happened because like we had a really, really engaged, we still do have like a very engaged fandom, and so like I, like linked a lot of examples of fan art in my book proposal to be like, yes, it's like, yes, I could say like 180,000 people are listening to this every month, and like, that's great. That's awesome. But also like, look at what they're doing. Like they're making this incredible art. Look at this tattoo that somebody got. And I think for a publisher, like that's really compelling, right? Because like publishers, I think are much more invested in like building a fandom and building like, like buying something where, I mean, this is why book talk books are so big right now, right? Is because like they see like, oh my God, you've got 200,000 people commenting on your videos every day asking for this book. Like that's exciting. Those people are going to go out and buy a book. And so yeah, I think if you have like a very, very engaged fandom, if you also have like a TTRPG that you're selling online that people are playing and sort of engaging with your story in that way, like I think, other mediums is always interesting to people as well. But honestly, like I would focus mostly on just growing your show as best you can on your own. I am a big advocate for like, if you don't, it can be great to partner with like a network like a Rusty Quill or like a Fable and Folly to get ads, right? Because well, a lot of podcast hosting services these days, whether it's like Libsyn or Podbean or whatever, have, or even actually Spotify's now hosting ads, and I think that they have an ad marketplace. They do make it possible for like an individual podcaster to get programmatic ads on their podcast from like 1,000 listens or whatever. Look into that. See if you can get programmatic ads yourself and just like split the commission with whatever your hosting platform is. But if you can't, then like those networks can be great. But in terms of like a platform or production company that is maybe going to want a piece of your IP or a piece of ownership or something like that in exchange for distributing or marketing, I'd be really, really skeptical of that. First of all, I don't know that I would necessarily waste your time looking for that. And second of all, like if anybody tells you that they know how to market your podcast and make it big and it's a fiction podcast, they're lying to you. They don't know that. I've been doing this for 10 years. I don't know a single person who actually knows how to effectively do that, myself included. There are people who are better at it than others. And like, if you're looking to like hire a firm to actually help you market a podcast, Tink Media is fantastic. They actually understand the ecosystem. They arrange a lot of really great cross promos. Cross promos continue to be the most effective way to market your podcast. But like, again, like that's stuff that you can sort of do like ad hoc or that you can kind of figure out by being in the community yourself. The most valuable thing that I have had in my 10 years in audio drama is my IP. And unlike in television or some other medium, I own all of my IP. If I created it, I own it. So it's like there are things that I've worked on in depth, like Bridgewater, right? Like, which is the show that I make with Erin Menke and Misha Collins, where I don't own the IP. But that's because I didn't come up with that idea, right? Like Erin came up with that idea and then called me and was like, hey, I've got this idea. Like, would you want to work on it with me, right? So it's like I shouldn't own that idea. But if I came up with the idea and I made the show, I own it. Nobody else owns it. And that is the most valuable thing for me personally. And the thing that sort of yielded the most like career growth and profit. So in terms of growing your show into something that is appealing for a platform or a producer or a sponsor, I mean, sponsors are kind of different, right? Because if you can get a sponsor, like they usually don't want anything from you except the sponsorship that they, the ears that they are getting on the sponsorship. But if you're trying to grow it to sort of pitch to somebody, and if you've grown it to a point where you can pitch those people, I think really, really hard about what those people are going to give you that you don't already have. And I think if you are at the point where you're like pitching a podcast platform that might be interested in distributing your show because you have 50,000 listens per episode or whatever, really push them on what they can offer you, because you might actually be at the stage where you just should be pitching to other mediums, where you should be pitching to agencies, you should be pitching to publishers, you should be pitching to TV studios, because you probably have something pretty valuable if you've got a really, really engaged audience. So that's my 2 cents on that. Okay, and actually, Chimso asked another fun question that I'll just quickly answer, and then I'll be done for the month. Which is, have you ever read fan fiction based on the Bright Sessions or any of your other work? And the answer to that is no, I have not. I have a policy that if I am actively making something, I obviously am not allowed to read fan fiction. Please never, ever send me fan fiction or any of my actors' fan fiction of anything that we are actively making. It's a huge legal issue, actually. So don't do that. I finished making the Bright Sessions. I technically could be reading fan fiction of the Bright Sessions because I'm not making more of it. But I have not, actually, because I'm still, I think, at the point where it's like just a little bit strange for me. Like I can't sort of like get outside of it to read the fan fiction. But I love that people write it. I want people to continue to write it for that show and for anything else I make. And perhaps someday we'll do a deep dive on AO3. But in the meantime, please continue to write it and share it with your friends because I think it rules that people are doing that. Okay, thank you everybody for joining me. This was so fun as always. And I will see you all next month.